So this session is going to be the question and answer session. And so I have many questions here and more online. People have been writing. So what I would like to request Johnny Bai is to give a few minutes answer.
Yes, sure.
So that we can get to our questions. They're all good. And I try to combine them if they're similar, but they're all very unique. So rather than editing, just try to be very fair. First question. What are you working on currently in your spiritual progress?
Anyway, welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a nice little break. Well, I was mentioning this morning that really the main thing was to increase my remembrance. That's simple because that's the ultimate destination. But also I think to a few things. One is detachment, because I think it's the real mark of a yogi. But as we were saying, Baba's detachment, to really be the detached observer of life, I think is really such a state of wisdom. And then I think the power of good wishes and pure feelings. That's always something important. And to me, just always trying to hold those feelings for others. So they're probably the three main things. Was that short enough? Probably too short.
I think we like very precise points, right? So, is there an overdose of gyan? Let's practice.
I think that could be true in a sense that we hear a lot of knowledge, but to apply knowledge takes a lot of effort. And I often think the first step is to know. The second step is to believe. The next 998, applying it, experiencing it. And that's that sort of internal research. And in a sense, spiritual learning is taking one idea and just going deeper and deeper and deeper into one idea to practice it. And I'm a great believer that to take one thing and just do it even over a few months, because then you see tangible change. If you try to do too much, you don't see any real tangible shift in yourself. So I've done experiments in the laboratory of my mind over a few months. Yeah. So I really do think, we heard about Mama, that Mama would listen and practice. She had that spiritual power. But I really do think that if we do one thing and even write a little diary, keep a little diary about the effort that I'm making, then you start to see a tangible change. Otherwise, sometimes we just go along in Brahman life, we have love for Baba, we have faith, but I just keep just going along, so to speak.
Great, thank you. How to control waste thoughts? I think it's already been covered.
Well, in that way, really, there's either waste or gyan, quite frankly. And, the more we really play with the jewels of knowledge. But as I was saying earlier, for me, yes, sometimes you'll take an idea and go into the depth of it. But to me, churning is more the perception of life, trying to look through Baba's perception, how he sees life, how Baba sees death, how Baba interprets relationships, everything. I look through Baba's filter. And when I think in that way, there's much less capacity for waste. And yet, I can't even remember when I was talking about this, but to me, in a sense, waste indicates a lack of acceptance of drama. I'm a soul, I'm in an eternal drama. If things happen and if I create a big tsunami of waste. It's because I haven't absorbed the depth of the truth of drama. Because drama is perfect. Whatever happens, so-called the good things of life and the not so good things, it's perfect. It is what it is. And I think that when I really have that quality of relationship with drama, it reduces the amount of waste. I really feel also to keep active in Brahman life, because the more you don't, you're not so active in service and so on, the capacity to overthink. And overthinking seems to be the nature of life today. We're just addicted to overthinking on everything which happens, to the point we can't even sleep very well.
A lot of time those overthinking is because you want to make sure that you're making the right decision. So what is the good balance between making a good decision and accepting drama?
I think that really when you have Gyan, clearly, you'll make very instant decisions, literally instant. Because you'll see through the filter of God's truth, of the law of karma, the scenes of drama, the soul's parts, and you very quickly, I've seen with the seniors, they rarely sort of take a long time it's quite a quick. The more detached you are, the better the quality of the decision. You see objectively. The more attached, that's when we sort of have to weigh up things over a long period of time. In saying that, Daddy Janki often used to say, when people would ask things, she'd often say, wait and see. And sometimes we jump in and we want to make a decision, but other times it's good just to let drama unfold and see how things pan out as well. But I really feel the more I'm detached, really, the better the quality of decision that we make. We have that objectivity.
Do you talk to yourself like, Charlie, stop? Don't go there.
Well, not quite like that. But I think I remember Baba said he was looking, how Baba sometimes did a tour of the world, looking at the children. And once Baba said he did a tour of the world, and there's one thing the children needed, and that was a full stop. And, in a way, Daddy Janki once said, the quality of the 8 jewels is they can put a full stop in a second. You know how maybe there's been a problem or a difference with another, and the mind just chronically overthinks and just reworks it. I mean, it's just such a waste of energy. And often you just go over and over the same thing. Like we're so educated, we just think over and over and over about the same thing because it's unfinished business in the soul. And I think to have the spiritual power, the ultimate spiritual power, to put a full stop to a stream of thinking saves so much energy. But to me, it's like that really is the ultimate state of spiritual power that I see. How sometimes you watch your mind go in a wrong direction and you know where it's going to lead you. It won't make you happy, but we still go down that wrong direction. I think real love for the self is to put that full stop before you go down into that rather unhappy place.
Great, thank you. Is a soul's purity the core of each one, same as Baba, the ocean of purity?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Theoretically, Baba's eternally pure. And when we're in the soul world, we are equally pure. Yeah, so, but as when the soul takes birth and rebirth, and I develop that account of purity, because when the soul goes home, it's like the account is clear. But there was somewhere recently we were talking about this, that Baba says the whole part is in the soul. The whole part, every millisecond of 5,000 years is recorded. That part remains eternal, eternally there. And so even when, how does the soul become pure? How does the soul become pure? It's not that the parts removed, the impure sanskaras just merge back into the part, so to speak. And so now it's like, when I come to Baba, my sanskaras are impure. Then I have an intellect to know truth, and I start to work on them. And the more I sort of connect with my pure sanskaras, the less that part of impurity has effect, and it just merges back into the memory track. But it's there the whole time. So it's in the recording, even when the soul goes home, but it has no influence. So in a way, becoming pure is just that the impure part merges back into the soul and has no influence on me. Am I making sense? Or well, I would, to me, my definition of purity is a state of being when all aspects of my life are based on truth. So purity is the fragrance that emerges out of truth. So when you base your life on the eternal self, on Baba, etc., then the fragrance that emerges out of that truth is purity. And when the soul goes home, if all the account is clear, then momentarily, in a sense, you're similar to Baba. But of course, as soon as we come down, it changes. But in the soul world, in one sense, I would say we're all similar to Baba. Yeah. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts about that.
Are you pure at the core of yourself?
Well, the recording in the human soul, even Baba has a recording of his part too.
Mm-hmm.
His part's eternally pure. My part is temporarily pure. But I have 2,500 years where nothing can influence me. I have no experience of sorrow. So you can say it's pure, but it's different in the sense Baba is eternally the same. Each one of us, every other actor, goes through the phases of, so the original state is pure. It's pure. But the present state is grossly impure. And, Baba's got that unique part where he never, ever is tainted by anything, can never be influenced. But my original state is pure, but then it's tainted. But the recording of purity is still in the soul. It's always there, but it just merges back in. It's like I was saying yesterday, the LP record, or was it sometime? I forget what I was. I'm still not sure which time zone I'm in at the moment. The LP record, the whole part is in the LP, and the needle is time, and it just draws out. So when the needle's in the golden age, it draws out all the actions, thinking is pure. But as I become body conscious, the needle of time draws out the impure part of the soul, but it all merges back into the soul when I go home. And in the soul world, I'm not conscious, but the whole part is there, but it's latent. It's not influencing, it's not working at that time. It's just is. These are pretty difficult things at 3:00 in the afternoon. Sometimes the brain is a little bit slow after a big lunch. So
in Brahma Kumaris philosophy, or what we believe, is drama set. So there is no decision that we make that can change it. So we accept the way it is, and it's not going to change, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's why when you think, drama is eternal, unchanging, fixed. It's never going to change. So when I fight with it, when I fight with my thoughts, I don't like it, I reject it. What am I doing? It's like someone was once telling a story about some people, indigenous people, and they showed them a film. They'd never seen a film before. I think it was somewhere in South America. And they put up a screen and they're all sitting around watching this film. And the baddie guy started to beat up the goodie. And so all the people ran to the screen and started to beat him up on the screen. You know, we laugh, but that's what we do actually. We're doing the same thing. It's sort of like we're sort of attacking something which is, it is what it is, you know. And that's why I think really our relationship with drama is a big thing we need to work on. And once something happens, once you realize it's happened, what can I do? Really to put a full stop and move on. Because most of us, you know, the past is so ever present. It hangs over my present and disturbs my present so much. And then I can't do anything about the past. And when we understand the law of karma, we understand unpleasant things happen. But I've got to let them go and move on. I've really got to let them go and move on. I don't know whether you remember in Daddy Janki's last few years, I read many of her classes where she would say, whatever happened a minute ago, forget it. Whatever happened a second ago. And when we go into the golden age, we totally live in the present. We absolutely live in the present. But when we have karmic accounts like we do now, the mind's always pulled back to the past. The more I go in the past, I will project into the future. Hence why people are so anxious about the future at the moment, because it's almost like they're fearful of the karmic story overlaying and disturbing my future. They feel very insecure. But in the golden age, we just live for now. Yep.
Okay. What is your suggestion for the Zoom children to make good progress? I think you answered this yesterday too. I feel like I've got this one.
I think it was a little bit different yesterday. It was like, as I said, I think it doesn't really matter where I sit. It's really my attitude to effort. And I think if I keep the routine and really practice, like that first question, that not just believe, but actually really apply Baba's knowledge wherever I sit, I think that, you know, there can be a lot of progress. But for the Zoom children, I think it's good to make effort if you can to get to the center every so often. Because sometimes we get into a pattern. If I start in the Zoom way, I think that's the way to go. But actually, really, you know, when I started, a Paka Brahman attended Murli every single day. You're only considered a true Brahman. I can see Gita Ben's nodding her head. And it's a different world now. But I think just like today, it's nice to come into the gathering. And it's a powerful atmosphere when it's in the gathering. And sometimes we need to, I think, make that effort. Because I find when you interact with others, when you live with others, there's self-transformation. Sometimes it's harder when I'm only on myself to really know how much I'm really changing. It's actually, you know, living in the heart of the Brahman family really helps me know who I am and my sanskaras and what I need to change.
Yes, that's so true.
We're getting through these questions.
Yes.
Speeding up.
Okay. How do you deal with 1,000-fold punishment for not following Shrimat?
Oh, is there another question? You know, one thing I think to take, you know, Dharam Raj, I remember Daddy Janki saying once we need a relationship with the Father, the teacher, the Satguru, and Dharam Raj, because in a sense, when I look into the face of Dharam Raj now, I can see who I am and what I need to change. But, you know, the way I see Dharam Raj is on the way home, we come in front of, you know, perfection. Baba is perfection. If you were to say to me now, Charlie, you're like this and you've done this, I can defend myself, right? I'll say, no, I'm not. You know how sometimes we're very defensive. But there we will see the reality of who I am and what effort I made. And then that realization is, this is my eternal part. I knew God, and what did I do? It's actually Not that Baba judges me, I judge myself in the mirror of perfection. I look into this truth and I have a complete account of what I became after knowing Baba. And that's why I don't think, why Daddy Janki was saying to have a relationship with Dharam Raj now, so that because we have huge blind spots. That's a part of devotion. Because I had weaknesses, I didn't like to see them. I suppressed them or I deny them. And yet I think now it's so important to try to see myself objectively. What are the things I need to change? Because sometimes we're such experts at denial, we just cancel out. We do a bad behavior and we pretend it doesn't happen. Once when I was younger, I was working in a kitchen as a student. And one day, one of the chefs just got so wildly angry and picked up pots and threw them all over, and we were all ducking. He was so... And afterwards, when he cooled down, I said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "You looked quite upset." No, I'm fine. It was amazing. It's like he just cut it down, just like deleted it. And apparently that is a psychological thing, that we just don't like to really see those things in myself. So we just have all these mechanisms to deny it to myself, or blind spots in that way. And I think Gyan is really to look into the mirror of truth. And the biggest blind spot we all have is our beauty. There's no doubt about it. I think we can sometimes see our weaknesses, but we're blind often to our real beauty. And when I can see my real beauty, often then I can see objectively what weaknesses I have as well. So really, Baba sometimes he says very clearly, children, if you do these actions, there will be punishment. Punishment is my own realization of my part, eternal part. I knew God, but what did I do after knowing God? Did I follow what he told me to do? And that's the account. That's why as Brahmins, in a way, Dharam Raj is for Brahmins. Dharam Raj is really for Brahmins because we know God. Other souls who are ignorant will go home and they will also clear their account. And that's why really it's important to pay attention to my life now. But at the same time, I wouldn't be afraid of Dharam Raj, not, too fearful.
Very good. Okay.
Is anyone afraid of Dharam Raj? No one's admitting it anyway.
This was a request rather than a question. Can you do a meditation on the discus of self-realization? Maybe at the end.
Maybe, yes. But who remembers when Baba asked us to do the 5 forms?
Yeah.
Do you remember?
Yes.
Oh, everyone remembers that. And that was such an interesting exercise, because I think what I really learned is it's almost like we have 5 sets of sanskaras in the soul: the eternal set, the original set, the devotional set, the Brahman set, and the angel set. And I think when you really move through those, remember Baba really told us time and time again, every hour or something, every so often do this. What it does is makes you more detached from the present set of sanskaras. Because otherwise we so identify, oh, I'm like this, I have this weakness. And our identity of my present set of sanskaras keeps me stuck. That's what body consciousness is. I get stuck in the present. But the more I move around, I become more detached from the present set of sanskaras. Yeah, otherwise in body consciousness, I feel very deeply under the influence of that.
That's great. So we're not stuck in just
one set.
aspect.
Yeah.
Okay. When you are very vulnerable and trying to remain in self-respect, but get pulled in sanskaras of submission, what is a quick, no-fail yukti to stay in self-respect?
Can you repeat the question?
I think the key word is samskara of submission.
Yeah.
I think it's a new one. When you are very vulnerable and trying to remain in self-respect, but get pulled in samskara of submission. What is a quick, no-fail yukti to stay in self-respect?
And why I asked was what submission in this context means, what exactly? Because we can be submissive. You know, sometimes I think we have the sanskara of being a people pleaser. It's a very, very, very common sanskara because I lack self-respect. I want to please others. If they respect me, I feel good about myself. At least I get some respect. So I become very submissive to other people. Really, that's body consciousness in a sense. I should really not be submissive to anybody. We give respect. We can be humble. We can be cooperative. We can be all of that, but not submissive. It's a form of body consciousness. And when we lack self-respect, we sort of sometimes bow down and allow people to walk over me and push me around. And sometimes some people misinterpret humility and think, oh, if someone tells me something, even when I don't really feel it's right, I just bow down and allow it to happen. But I can say what I need to say, but I always should do it with respect. And sometimes I think a lot of us suppress ourselves, you know. We don't want to hurt other people. That's good. But at some points of time, like I'm normally, you know, don't say much. But I've learned over the years that when I need to say something, if I disagree with something, to say it in a loving and respectful way, not even. And I feel even if there's a slight little bit of anger or negativity, don't say it. But if you can express yourself in a true way, you have to sometimes. Even in the Brahman family, you're able to say what you need to say, but to say it because the intent of words other people feel. And, you know, if you think, I'm trying to think of an example, if someone really loves you, they really love you, and they give you some constructive criticism saying, I wouldn't do things this way, we take it with a good heart because the energy, the intent is love. But if someone says exactly the same thing to you, but their intent, they're frustrated with you, they're angry with you, you won't take that well. And that's where I think it's so important to maintain loving relationships. You know, you can have a loving relationship with someone for years and one thing can change it, just one thing. And how long does it take to heal that relationship? So it's learning to really express myself, but it's the intent behind the words, it's the feelings. And if the feelings are a bit negative, it's not worth saying. But if I can say things in a loving and respectful way, even if I have a different viewpoint, I think it's okay.
I think you can even tell if it's on a text or email, you can get the intention behind the words.
You can, yeah. Because the whole law of karma is based on intent. It's the intent behind things. Why do we meditate? We go into this elevated state, feel so close and loved by Baba. And then when my actions come out of that place, the intent is the highest intent. That's very elevated karma. The reason why Baba has us meditate in the morning, because when I create high consciousness, then all my behaviors and my actions come out of that place, and they are very effective. That good karma helps me and it helps others as well. So it's a tricky one because we have to learn to speak. Sometimes some people feel so suppressed because they keep suppressing themselves, you know, and then they blame somebody else. But actually it's me suppressing myself. And what happens sometimes, I suppress. So when I finally say something, and we know the result of that. There's one sister in Australia, and I've often spoken to her. She's an expert at difficult conversations. She knows how to broach a difficult subject in a very loving and respectful way. And it's a real art form to be able to do that. Otherwise, then you're thinking something, I'm thinking something, but it's never brought out in the open to really resolve. So it's, having difficult conversations is not so easy, so to speak.
Does it help to rehearse things like this? Before it happens, you kind of rehearse?
Well, yes, why not? But what I pay attention to, what I felt I've seen the daddies, they just had so much love. So when you feel loved, you will listen. But if you don't feel that person has real love or respect or value for you, that's when you start to become defensive or react. Because sometimes in service, we have to have open conversations, don't we? And I think it's a spiritual maturity that we can sort of sit together, listen to each other, and work through things. It's because it's the end of the cycle. We are different. Differences will emerge. I don't believe that's the problem. Differences will come. It's normal. It's how I respond to them. Do I use knowledge and yoga and these sorts of things, or do I just go back to my old emotional hurt feeling stuff and then store it inside and hold on to it? That doesn't help at all.
Yeah, that's true.
I have a question related to the same one, if you don't mind, please. Sometimes.
Okay, introduce yourself.
Oh, my name is Rasik Roniga. I'm from Los Angeles.
Okay.
Okay, and I have a question posted on the chat box. Now, sometimes we see that some people need help because they have a very kind of sensitive nature. They feel that they are victimized, like at everything that happens to them. Like people are criticizing them. Now, whatever other people have taught, they haven't received that in life. So I don't know, it's a feeling of a kind of being victimized at the same time. There could be an element of jealousy in there too. But it's probably like from the birth that they have been brought up in an atmosphere of like a real fear from the parents or from other elders. And now they try to change this now. And I know someone who asked me, I don't want to die with this nature or sanskara in me. How can I change myself? That's the question they asked. Now, I think there are swamans, we can ask them to do bhattis and things according to Surya Bai's classes. But what do you think, brother? How can we help them?
Can I just paraphrase that? How can we help really sensitive people who always feel a victim of life? I think that's what he was saying.
It was more like a comment. Yeah.
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 How do we help sensitive people?
Yeah. There's one brother in Australia who met Baba, and Baba gave him drishti. He's an old Brahmin, he's 45 years in Guyana. And Baba's blessing for him was, you haven't been cursed with a sensitive nature. That's what Baba said to this brother. It's so true. He's so sort of easy, because sensitivity is ego. Sensitivity is ego. Now, some people always interpret ego as being very bold and dominating, but the ego of inferiority is really the powerful ego. I would say virtually everyone is sensitive when they first come to Baba. But if I'm listening to the question, if they're not a Brahmin, then they're not working on themselves. And I don't know really what we can do, but try to be as kind as possible to such a person, because there are so many people in the world who permanently feel they're a victim. And there's one brother in Australia too who says only victims blame. Only victims blame. And when I've put myself in the position, I feel disempowered, so I'm always blaming others, blaming situations, blaming the centers, blaming the instruments. Everyone's wrong, And unfortunately, a lot of people, don't take responsibility for who they are, because in a sense, when you become a Brahmin, A true Brahman will take full responsibility for who I am and not really project that on others. But if they don't have knowledge, and I'm not sure, he didn't really say, then it's very hard. But still, I think Baba's way is to try and work with all types of souls. And if you give people love and respect, at least temporarily they feel valued and they temporarily feel better. Sometimes once Baba said, another way of describing soul consciousness is to rebuild my self-respect. And to me, that's the big learning curve of Brahman life, to rebuild my self-respect step by step, so I have a solid foundation. Some years ago, I had a thing for myself. It doesn't matter if I'm criticized. That's life. People are going to criticize. What matters is when the criticism makes me lose my self-respect. It doesn't matter if I make a mistake. We all make little mistakes. But what matters is when the mistake makes me lose my self-respect. Doesn't matter if I fail. Because what happens, all these things make me lose my self-respect. But really what Baba's doing is restoring a quality of self-respect in me that's absolutely stable. It's the great gift. And as Baba said once, as much as you have self-respect, you can respect everybody. As much as you have self-respect, you will be humble. As much as you have self-respect, you will be loving and others will love you. And really, I think when self-respect returns, life becomes much easier. And probably in my Brahman journey, I've worked on that as much as anything, to, create a state of self-respect and sustain it in all situations. It's what happens in this world is people have self-confidence. So we have confidence to pass exams, run companies, run organizations. It doesn't mean they like who they are. And that often happens. I gave a course to a man in Australia who's a billionaire. And he said to me in his own words, he said, I'm a total success out there and a complete failure in here. That's what he said. I said, why? He said, I'm not happy. I'm not happy. So the world is about the external image. And so many people have this incredible image. But internally, the relationship with the self is really unhealthy and fractured. It's very common. And sensitivity is that form of ego. The more I become soul conscious, the less I have that sensitive nature.
Yeah, it's a very big subject.
It's a huge subject. But isn't it interesting what Baba said to this brother? You haven't been cursed with a sensitive. I've never heard Baba say that.
Sensitivity is a big area I think about a lot. And I'm a little curious about this sort of equation of sensitivity equals ego in the relationship to trauma, because I see that people in the world, and I include myself in this, I experienced a lot of trauma growing up, and it made me very sensitive to things that were particularly connected to the type of trauma. And I wouldn't feel blame, at least in many different situations. I would just feel a kind of turbulence inside, or I would feel a kind of emotional energy, and I wouldn't even necessarily have any thoughts, that were clear at the time. And another thing is, many years ago, I'll just be very open, when I was in therapy and I was trying to work out some things going on, and one of the therapists turned me on to the work of this psychologist named Elaine Aron, who wrote a book called The Highly Sensitive Person. And she talks about how some people are actually just more sensitive in the kind of fundamental sense of the word, in that they pick up more information. And she called it deep sensory processing. And the therapist said, I had this, and that was part of what was going on for me. And that felt true to me, and that you could feel good things much more, in a way, deeply than other people. but also people that have it can just sort of get impacted by phenomena more because they're taking in a really high level of information. There's actually a documentary out about it these days, actually called Sensitive. So I was just curious, how does that sort of equation of sensitivity equals ego work in relation to trauma?
There is a positive sensitivity that when you're sensitive to tune into other people, in a way, I would say that's like emotional intelligence, where I have that emotional intelligence to come in front of somebody and read them and know how to respond. Some people are totally experts at that, tuning into another's soul and knowing how to respond. That's sort of a positive sensitivity. But I think what you're saying, I think the sensitivity based on my karmic accounts. I've had a karmic account and there's some trauma as a result. And so I'm very sensitive to the response of that. The sensitivity I was really talking about was more just on day-to-day stuff, that the tiny, little tiny things disturb me, push me down, hurt me, upset me. I'm like, as Baba even says, a touch me, not plant, that sort of thing. And Baba, when Baba was around, he was, he used to say when people are too delicate, it's more, maybe that's a better word, delicate and fragile. Baba used to say, grow up, grow up. He was a bit strong with them so that, all the time saying, oh, this is happening, always sort of allowing the drama to push me around, so to speak. Baba used to say, grow up, in the sense, though, that we need gyan to look through things rather than my ego accept this little thing that goes wrong or little comment or little situation. But the sensitivity based on some huge past karmic account, maybe we could say you will be wary after something has happened. Yeah. There's actually one sister in Australia who she moved from India, very lovely sister, but she was living in a center and someone just came to the door and stabbed her 6 times. And she's so good, but she was just telling me still, and I think this is what you're referring to a little bit, that she's mostly good, but sometimes she feels a little bit vulnerable in some situations because the memory of that comes back. Each one, yeah, that's right. And I think it's a different sensitivity to this day-to-day ego, if I can say. My ego keeps taking all these little insults and hurts, and someone just asks me something in just a normal way and I'll take, I'll let it upset me or hurt me. Yeah. Does that make sense at all?
Yes, actually, that is amazing. That really, I've never heard. That was amazing. As they say, so that happened. That was really special. I have never heard that defining sensitivity in such a microscopic way. Really, because it's a quote unquote sensitive issue. You almost don't, this is really loud. You almost don't want to touch it, right?
Yeah. And when someone is sensitive, we dance around them. You think, I have to be a little bit careful. So you put on your velvet gloves and you think. But
I just add too that, I think the deities and in the golden age, we're actually highly sensitive. We're very in touch with everything that's beautiful and good, and in touch with each other in such a way that we may not even have to, explain things to each other and such.
Of course,
the positive side of the sensitivity.
Because they have that pure sensitivity. And I feel in the golden age, we won't need to speak much. I think just our face and our drishti will convey most of what we're feeling, and people will understand. The more we become gross, we talk, and still then people don't understand us. And I absolutely, the Australian Aboriginals, they were so silent in their mind. They could walk in the deserts and they could tune into their family and find them. We are all incredibly psychic, actually. And as we're sitting here, people pop into your mind because they've thought of you and you feel this, you get this instant message. Imagine when that's refined, that's pure. You can almost know people even when they're not with you, where they're at, how they're feeling. So much will be done on a subtle level, which is so divine, isn't it, in the golden age? I think it's such a lovely thing. Your face, your drishti, your vibrations will convey how you're feeling or what you want someone to know. And I think there'll be, to me, in the golden age, I have a feeling there's less thinking. And I used to have the image, when they have those slow motion drops coming into a pond and then the pond just, I think that's like a thought in the golden age. Just one thought and then a beautiful fragrance of love or peace or happiness just fills the mind. So less thinking, more feeling in the golden age. Here, lots of thinking and hardly any feeling experience. The mind is taken over completely. It's really fascinating to think what the deity mind will be like. It's absolutely different from the mind now. This chronic overthinking won't be happening.
I would compare it with a Brazilian soccer team, the way they play without talking to each other, and they are able to pass. They understand where everybody is.
Well, maybe the Brazilian soccer team were deities at one point of time. So, I don't know. We've got a couple more questions.
Yeah, okay. This is a very specific scenario. When someone does not receive a particular seva in the yajna, the soul sulks with others and starts complaining. For example, too much seva or not given any chance to do seva. So extreme. How do you handle your thoughts, feelings, and emotions and change your attitude towards souls and towards the situations?
My feeling these days is that, everyone is unique. Everyone has some specialties and everyone has some challenging aspects to them. And I think some people, quite frankly, are just chronic complainers. It's just a part of their nature. Can we change other people? Can we change? I don't think we can. So I either let it affect me or I observe it. And the wise soul, you observe it or even keep giving people that value, giving people that time and respect. What can we do? We can't change others, but some are never really very happy. There's a permanent state of discontentment. There's something in the karmic story. Now, if the soul can really use gyan and attain and start to experience, it can change it. But sometimes it can't happen much. So what do? We just don't. We can't do much, but still, I think if we can help, if we can give good wishes, then we do that. But sometimes it's a sort of a deep account, these particular souls.
You want to go? We still have a few. Can we go through quickly? Because I know some of you took time to write these things. So how do you get clear on your role in drama, in spiritual family and yagya when you are still working on trying to free yourself from various bondages?
Well, all of us are trying to free ourselves from various bondages. So, I feel I can only do service when I really become pure, but actually none of us are completely pure as such. So I think, we should do service. My feeling is, I don't think we have to think about what is my role. I really feel that if we remember Baba puts the soul in the right place. I really do feel. I think it's another form of subtle body consciousness if I'm always thinking, what's my role? What's my role? Because before Gyan, we define myself by my role. That's the definition of who I am. But in Gyan, I define myself by who I am as a soul and my relationship with Baba. And when I feel close to Baba, I really think I don't worry wherever I am. I feel that's where Baba wants me to be, and I play my part there. So I don't think we need to overthink, about where I should be and what my role is. Baba assigns the roles.
And enjoy the role.
Yeah.
What is the fastest way to get the closest to Baba as possible in the midst of physical pain, physical limitations, noisy living situation, situational demands seemingly beyond one's physical capacity, and without much logic help available? What is the fastest way to get closest to Baba as possible?
Each one of us has our own unique karmic story at this time. And sometimes, the soul has the good fortune to be quite free. Some are in bondage to people because of family situations. Some have physical situations. But I think each one of us has our own unique set of karmic accounts. But really, if I have this deep recognition, I've actually found God, I'm God's child, I belong to God, I experience Baba, that power can lift me out of a lot of the suffering of that karmic situation. When I change my consciousness, I can change my vision on my karmic situation. I can even lift myself out of it. But, some people do have chronic pain, and it's a really, really deeply challenging thing to deal with. Daddy Genki, I think, had a lot of pain, and yet we know her courage to, how she'd say, I talk to my body, and I tell my body now. Because I think if we let it take me over, it amplifies in my thinking any karmic story. But if I really keep it in perspective, it's the end of the cycle. I'm God's child, I'm a soul. And these accounts are going to come in front of me to all of us in different ways. Sometimes in the mind, sometimes in relationships, sometimes in health, sometimes in wealth. They're all going to come our way. And that's where we have to be so wise because, it is the time we know Baba, but it's the time of settlement as well. Things are going to happen. That's why we have knowledge to put it in perspective and not let it take me over completely. Use Gyan and I can manage all these challenges that come my way. Yeah, but pain is not a small thing. And that's why, Baba said about medicine, they're the fruits of the Iron Age. And if we use them, they can help, relieve pain. And, there's no doubt, I think all of us would prefer not to put these things in our bodies. But if they do relieve certain things, karmic things which happen at the end of the cycle, use them. Even Baba said to use them. But I know we are all different. We all have our unique perspective on that. And I really respect that. But, Baba himself was diabetic. And he had to take insulin. And sometimes in those days, I think insulin had some animal product in it. But, what choice did he have? He needed to take it for his illness. So, sometimes we can't be too fundamentalist about certain things. We have to be a bit, it's the end of the Iron Age. We can't be too sort of moralistic about how things should be. We have to live to our values, but sometimes we have to sort of compromise a little bit because of the nature of the world at this time.
And not to beat up on ourselves. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. We can become very heavy-handed with ourselves. Yeah.
Yes, this is the last one. What was your process of shifting awareness from being a center coordinator in Melbourne, where you grew up, to becoming the national coordinator of Australia in Sydney? Wow. Did you feel like, wow, I am the national coordinator now?
Nothing. Zero feeling of change. No. I think, in Lokic life, we define ourselves by what we do, but in Brahman life, Baba asks us to do it, we do it, but no, not even one thought.
But you did not feel like, oh, so much responsibility now.
No, I really feel light, and I've promised Baba to remain light, because you can overthink about so many things. In the confluence age, there's so many situations that come up. And, that's what I learned from Daddy G. She just felt she was an instrument and just remained light about all situations. And it's, we're a trustee. I really every day say to myself, it's Baba's center, they're Baba's children. I'll do what I can to help, but sometimes I can't fix things. And even that's a good thing to realize. There's problems that are really unsolvable sometimes. So I'm not going to worry about it. Sometimes there's karmic things going on that you just can't heal. So rather than keep worrying, just don't worry. What can I do? At least I should try to be accurate in myself. I try to support everyone as much as I can. But after that, I'm not going to worry about things I can't do much about.
Great.
So there are a few questions here.
Start with one.
Okay, so this question is more about the comment you made on drama is neither good or bad and detached. So our question is around that. Can we just enjoy drama no matter what happens? Even if it is bad, how can we be neutral to everything in drama?
But we should be the detached observer of drama, but we're not insensitive to other people's feelings. How can I think when we become Brahmins, we realize death is just change. It's not a big deal. And yet, once we have that truth of the soul and the soul's journey, and yet other people around me don't have that knowledge. So when someone dies, they have incredible grief, etc. So we should respect that. We should respect how they feel in that sort of way. But really, God is 100%, Baba's 100% detached from the drama. And ultimately, we have to become such a detached observer, because there are terrible things that are happening in the world at the moment. Human behavior is becoming so depraved in so many ways. So if I let myself get disturbed and shocked, being shocked is body conscious. It's body conscious. It's not that I'm insensitive to other people's suffering, but I'm not going to take on the suffering myself. So I'm not going to let it upset me, but I will still be sensitive to those people who are disturbed by it. But often when you remain stable, when big things happen, that is such a support for people around you. Just when one person is not shaken, they can stabilize other people. Because really, we are going to see scenes of drama that are going to be, sometimes, when Baba uses that expression, the urn of sin will overflow. To me, that's destruction. It's almost like the karmic story of humanity is going like this. And it's going to be unbelievable scenes. And Baba, if we are affected, we won't be an effective server. If I'm a detached observer, I can be much more effective as a server in that way. That's why the more I practice now, for me, the more I'm detached from my body, I'm automatically a detached observer of the scenes of drama. The more I'm attached to my body, the more scenes of drama affect me in that way. It's a thing, we have to be a complete detached observer, but sensitive in the good sense of that word to other people and their needs at that time. So if we, just to be compassionate to people who suffer, who are suffering from a scene.
Thank you. On the same lines, the next question is more on the soul consciousness. I try to be soul conscious all the time, but it does not happen all the time. I also disconnect with the mind from everything. It's almost impossible all the time. Do we make ourselves invisible? So I think this is a comment around when you talking about become very small.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
It's just really the subtlety of the human soul. That's the point that was being made. The reality of the self is that I have no size. I'm absolutely subtle. And, I think to really be so detached from my body and soul conscious, it takes a long time and a lot of attention. I've often thought about Brahma Baba. How did he leave his body at will? Only when you completely stop identifying with it will you fly from the body. So he really conquered body consciousness completely in that way and became a full angel. And so far, as I understand, only one has done that in 85 years of teaching, which is pretty 86 or 87 now. Quite I think the greatest act of a human soul is Brahma Baba conquering body consciousness and becoming an angel. What an incredible, and he did that after 32 years. And even after 3 times that time, I don't think anyone else has achieved what he achieved. Quite amazing.
Thank you. So the question is more around guilty feeling. The question is how to deal with guilt feeling of not fully following Srimad. Is it a process or not? I feel that having guilt or thinking that it is a sin is same as in bhakti.
The solution is to follow Srimad, isn't it? Really? And then we won't have guilty feelings, because it just shows that, a part of me, my intellect says I should follow Srimad, but my sanskaras pull me away from that, or my desires, and then I start to feel guilty in between. That's when, I really got to get that determination from Baba to actually follow what Baba tells me to do. And really, Srimad is essential to have good yoga. Because when I follow Srimad, I'm not going to do any further bad action that will disturb my connection with Baba. Because when I do these subtle vikarmas, these negative actions, when I go to remember Baba, they pull me. They pull me into guilt, shame, worry, lack of self-respect, self-dislike, all these sorts of things. And that's why, to me, following Srimad isn't that I become really rigid and severe at all. It's just that I naturally, I even think after a while, it's not that you follow it, you own it. It's who you are, to follow everything which Baba says. It's a code of truth. Srimad is a code of truth of how to live in this world and go beyond the give and take of sorrow. It's when I value Srimad, I follow it. And that's where really, it needs a lot of courage, sometimes determination, not to be pulled away by my desires or sanskaras.
So the question is, sometimes it is easy to be merged in love with Baba. Sometimes in Murli, Baba has such a high bar that it seems too difficult to reach what he wants so as to be worthy, loved in his eyes. How to listen to Murli without judging the self harshly?
I think sometimes Baba just teaches the 8 jewels, sometimes the 108, sometimes the Brahmin family, and sometimes the whole world. So you've got to understand the audience that Baba is speaking to, because Baba's the father of all souls. I absolutely love it when he talks to the 8 jewels, because he's talking pure, unadulterated truth of the reality of life. And sometimes it's so strong, and yet it's the truth. I really love it. But if we understand that Baba is offering all of us the capacity to become one of the 108 or the 8 jewels when he talks at such a high level. And then it's really up to me to decide my part. Do I want to really try to follow everything? And in a way, that word number-wise, I think all of us should study it so deeply. Because to me, it's the real key to accepting everybody. Number-wise means we are different. It's not a judgment. When you look through a body conscious lens, it can seem judgment. What Baba's just saying, all of the children are different. Baba encourages all of us, but he knows that each one will play their part accurately according. We are different. Some have a huge capacity, some much less so. We had one brother in Australia who used to work full time. He used to run a kitchen and a retreat center. He'd only sleep maximum 3 or 4 hours a day. He could just keep going constantly, but hardly anyone else can do that. And he was never tired. He never once slept in yoga. I never saw him. So some people have an incredible physical capacity, or we're different. And the big thing is to know who I am and what I want to do with Baba. We should aim the highest, I feel. But Baba sometimes talks to this incredible level as really, and I think it's his respect for all of us that he offers us the chance to hear, you know, what we need to do if I want to become one of the 8 jewels. Who's one of the 8 jewels here in San Francisco? Everyone's smiling. You know, we were talking about this the other day in Australia that, you know, who are the 8 jewels? And I think it was Daddy Prakashmani saying that Baba loves surprises. I think 6 or 7 are pretty fixed, but there's 1 or 2 that aren't quite sure. So we don't know who's going to be the 8
So we
jewels.
still have a chance, right?
You still have a chance. You definitely have a chance.
So hope.
Yeah,
And that's why Baba always says a kingdom is being established.
that's right.
Mm.
And when we understand that deeply, we don't get wound up when people don't do things the way we feel they may, or don't come that often, or don't do this. Why should we worry? Each one's creating their own part. Of course, it's so accurate. The drama's perfect. And that's how we can remain content. Because if we don't absorb that knowledge of number-wise, then we feel, you know, a little bit discontent about others and perhaps why they don't do this or why they don't do that.
Thank you. The next question is on karma. Can you please let us know your views on karma? Does more karmic accounts surface as love with Baba deepens? And how to deal with it?
But you know what Baba says, doesn't he? That children, storms will come. Have you ever heard Baba say children's storms might come? Anyone ever heard that? If you're a Brahmin, storms are going to come. But I really do feel that if we follow Srimad accurately, we won't have any further bad karma. And so it's really dealing with the actions of the past that the soul has. And it's going to come. There will be storms that come to every single one of us. Not one came a pure soul, not one of us. And so it's a part of the journey. It's a part of the journey.
It's an interesting question. So Baba talks about certificate of contentment a lot, self, family, and Baba. So we have learned to keep dependency on Baba and not expect anything from anyone. But as we played various roles, when others expect of us, and when such expectations are unreasonable, how do we manage that so that not lose the certificate of contentment or love, but not give in to every unreasonable expectation?
Well, I think that we just, once again, we don't remain influenced by it because, you know, even in Sakar Baba's days, some had some expectations of him, some had of the daddies, this sort of thing that perhaps they were unrealistic. So we shouldn't worry about it, really. I think we have to be clear because we should try to, remain content and give contentment to others. But sometimes, if people's expectations are unrealistic, not much I can do, really. But I think when we remain in a high stage and we're really loving, having good wishes, most people will feel content. Most. And I remember Baba was saying, if 95% are happy with you, that's okay. If you have that 5% margin, because you can please some of the people some of the time, but you can't please all of the people all of the time. Can you? I don't think so. I don't think it's being realistic in that way. But, to remain content is a very elevated state in this world. It's a really high stage.
This question is around good wishes and pure feeling. While playing a role of a mother, when a child does not listen or work on their tasks, how to maintain good wishes and pure feeling?
I think you should ask some of the mothers that are here. They've probably got a better answer than me. But what I feel is that to hold the value of others in my attitude, to me, that's, when we have love based on truth, I see the goodness in another person. And when some people go through those difficult periods in Brahman life, sometimes they struggle. But if my vision remains on their goodness, my drishti, you're like, that's spiritual support. Emotional support is when you keep meeting people, talking to them, encouraging them, and then the next day you meet them again and they're down again. Spiritual support is knowing someone's value, knowing their capacity, and your drishti remains on that even if they're fluctuating. And that is incredible support for someone when they're just your drishti of giving them that respect, even when they're going through a turmoil internally, gives them such a support. That spiritual support is the real support, actually. That's what Baba does to us. All of us come very body conscious, but Baba can see our golden ages sanskaras. Baba knows the part of the soul, and his drishti goes to that part. And the first time I met Baba, that was my experience, really. I sat in front of Baba, and Baba gave me long drishti, and the feeling was that Baba's drishti scanned all the memory track, and fell on the original me, the pure me, the elevated me, and almost massaged that to the surface and introduced me to who I was. And something shifted in me, that just Baba's drishti. And what I saw is that I was seeing myself here. Baba was seeing me here. Whose vision is true? It's Baba's. Baba's vision is the real vision. We are addicted, and that's the right word, absolutely addicted to a negative vision of myself, a limited vision of myself. In body consciousness, I put myself in a box of limitation, what I'm not, what I can't do. And a lot of Brahmins, they love Baba, but they remain in that box. A true Brahmin will break out of the box and step into Baba's vision. Because Baba sees us all as ancestor souls, world benefactors, angels. And that's what Baba wants us to see ourselves like that too.
So the question is around how do you measure, right? So how do I know that my relationship is getting deeper with Baba?
I'm happier. Yeah, you really feel happy. And you feel lighter. I would say one of the things I've noticed over my Brahman life, I just steadily feel lighter and lighter about everything. So I think that when some accounts get cleared, you just feel lighter. But, really, ultimately, you feel really happy, deeply happy.
And sometimes things happen in your favor without trying so hard.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I definitely find life easier these days. Things just flow. And when they don't flow, I don't seem to worry about it. I really feel Baba's taught me not to worry about things. I just, it is what it is, It is what it is. What can you do sometimes? Just keep happy. Mm.
So the question again is on drama. If drama is fixed, what control do we have? And on the same lines, another question. Why is Ravan in drama?
Why is Ravan in drama? I don't know if there's an answer to that question. You know, he has his part as well. You know, we all become body conscious at some point. So what was the first part of the question again?
If drama is fixed, what control do we have?
We have control over my reactions to drama. That's all I have, actually. I can't control the drama. I can control my reactions. I can't control another human being, but I can control my reactions to another human being. And that's life. That's why it's always about me. Actually, it's always about me and my change. The drama is fixed. The drama is perfect. Even these scenes of drama at the end of the cycle with all the upheaval, it's perfect. It's how it will always be. So I've got to equip myself how to respond. I can't change any of this. It's fixed. But I can use Gyan to change my response so that I don't take sorrow from it. You know, but when I identify with it, I take sorrow. When I'm detached from it, I observe it and I can keep happy even as the scenes of drama change.
So Ravan is there because he is there.
Ravan is there because he is there. Yes, that's the best answer. Anyone else got a better answer than that? Yes, Elizabeth. If there's light, there's also darkness. Yes, well done. That's good.
I wouldn't say it's a better answer. I just usually tell students that we come in with a full tank of gas, and in the golden and silver ages, we use very little. And then there comes a time when we run out of gas. And so we run out of fuel, the spiritual fuel. So we're susceptible to, negative traits. We're just susceptible because we've got to hang on to something, take support of something.
Yeah.
I sometimes say we have a full bank account, and when we get to the copper age, we take out the credit cards and we start spending what doesn't belong to the soul.
When you give your course next, can I come? I think it sounds like it'll be a very entertaining course. The gas station and the bank and the credit cards.
So the question is, why are there Brahmins with anxiety?
Why are there Brahmins with anxiety?
And how to help them?
Well, some of the deepest sanskaras in the cycle of fear and insecurity. And this is where sometimes knowledge is intellectual. Some have the knowledge, but have a lot of fear of, losing their possessions, losing their wealth. They have a lot of insecurity about those sort of things. I often feel if you use your wealth for Baba now, you will be looked after for eternity, but some just can't. They just feel so fearful about the future and insecure in that way. Anxiety is like a fear of the future. And I would say, one is that you're just getting the vibe of the world, because the vibe of the world is increasing anxiety hugely. But really, if Gyan is deep, our future is wonderful. So there shouldn't really be anxiety. I think it's an indicator that there's a lack of deep understanding or the application of deep understanding of Baba's knowledge in that way. Once I was in, I think it was South Africa, someone asked a question, how much fear is real and how much is imagined? Because anxiety is imagined fear, basically. And I said, my answer was, I wouldn't have a clue. It was helpful, wasn't it? But I guessed I would say 90% of fear is imagined. And he said, research that he's read, this person, 93% of our fear is imagined fear. So based on my past experience, I overlay on the present and I imagine scenarios. And so that's what's happening at the moment. People are imagining all sorts of fearful scenarios about the future and what might happen to me and what might happen to my family.
So this question is around the addiction. How to deal with addiction to gadgets like phones, social media? Where can you keep watching something senseless in a way? You are avoiding the real work on yourself. Why you are having when you are having a normal life and no big upheaval, how do you get the motivation to work on yourself because you have everything okay going for yourself? When things are going well, how do you get motivation to work on your inner self?
I'm no expert on addiction at all, but I think that it's the state of the human soul now is just completely weak. And we become I feel the addiction to the telephone. The mind needs entertainment. Because if the mind is not entertained, it just turns in on itself, So it's a chronic distraction. And in a way, so much of life today is a distraction. Because if I really look at myself or what's happening in my life, people feel so depressed and down. So even I believe another addiction is busyness. It's an addiction. If you just keep busy, keep rushing, keep running, you can't stop and really, because when people stop and think about their lives, they feel really down. So whether it's the phone, whether it's over busyness, or sometimes to drown out the sadness and sorrow, we use drugs of different types. But it's really a state of the human soul when it's weakest at the end of the cycle. And there should be a lot of mercy, lost all power, that these things can really overcome me. But I'm sure that, some people, there's a whole field of psychology around addiction and the reasons for addiction and so on.
Can I ask a question? Can you share one favorite story about Chandruben? Like, how we say pillar to lean on, like when we have a difficult situations or tough, challenging situations or opportunities, we have someone to lean on, like Baba. We lean on Baba. And from my direction, the mirror, I can see Chandruben's face. And then when I see Chandruben's face, the picture, I feel courageous.
You feel
courageous?
Courageous.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah.
So. Oh, that's very nice.
Yeah.
I loved the way she was so authentic. She wasn't different inside and out. That's my experience. She was really who she was, she was open. And I love that sort of authenticity that, and sometimes, when people are like that, it's a bit strong, but I think it's really not overly diplomatic, but really authentic and open about the sort of person she was. Yeah.